I guess I'm going to talk about 2005 again, or 2004 and 2007, because I've been listening to old episodes of The Dice Tower. And the oldest episodes that are available for free are on Spotify, so I had to reinstall Spotify. I don't really like Spotify. Because a few times when I got into my car, it just started playing some random thing that I was not interested in, random music that I wasn't interested in. That's a tangent. Anyway, so I started listening to them on Spotify, and their episodes 50 something, I think 53 maybe, is where it starts. But there's earlier episodes that they had available on a DVD and maybe on a website. So maybe they're behind a paywall. That's fine. Maybe one day I'll go back to them. But for now, I just want to listen to the stuff that is available for free. And I find it interesting to listen to older podcasts that... especially prior to, I guess, the rise of YouTube. And YouTube, I think, opened up or began in around, I thought it was like earlier than 2007. I remember being on Google Video in like 2005-ish, and then maybe that's around the time that YouTube came out, but I think the video Me at the Zoo is the first video, and for some reason I'm thinking that was 2007. Anyway, it's either 2005 or 2007 that YouTube started. But my point is, I like going back to those time periods because, one, I like games. I like people talking about games. I like history. I like the history of games. And I like the nostalgia of listening to someone in a time period. And then I also like someone talking contemporaneously about, these things in the time that they were happening. So they're very interesting. And the first time I did this, it was a Dragonlance podcast. I think I've mentioned this before. And it was from the website, or they ran the website, the Dragonlance Nexus, and then they had a podcast, and I think it went back as far as 2003. And it was great to listen to hear people talk in that time about maybe it's Dragonlance, but they'd also mention other things. My point is that this 2006 episodes of The Dice Tower are talking about a lot of various games that all started during that time period. And I kind of talked about that in this video up there, if I remember to link to it. Anyway, it's my video that something fishy happened in 2004 to 2007. And some of it can be attributed to things like the Dice Tower, things like the podcasts that began talking about either Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering or board games. When people found those, they remembered their love of games, and they started thinking, one Saturday a month or one Saturday every couple months I can play some games, and I should go down to a game store and get some of those games so that when the guys come over, we can all sit around the table and play those games. And then there was also, Catan and a bunch of, entry-level games, or, the kind of games that bring in new people that are fairly simplistic, but also they showcase new things that aren't Monopoly or Game of Life or, that kind of family party game, that kind of thing. Oh, and there was also Cards Against Humanity that came out, probably around 2008 to 2010. But there were new games coming out that could hook people in and bring them into the hobby, and then also bring back people who had left the hobby. And there were people talking about various different subjects about different games, and it brought some excitement back and brought people back in. And people had maybe already started to slow down from whatever it was that they were doing before, and settling into their careers, maybe getting 8 hours of sleep a night, and then having a family, and now only having free time on maybe one Saturday or Sunday once in a while. And games were a way to at least still have the social aspects that they had kind of stopped engaging in by this point, because they were now in their late 20s, early 30s, and they had settled down. And games are good for people who have settled down. If you're constantly on the move, if you're just a vagabond probably not carrying around a bunch of games, I guess. I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. But the point is that it's this generational thing, I guess, that, you do things in your 20s that are more outdoorsy, out at different third spaces that are socializing and involve consuming alcohol or consuming other things. And then, you kind of got to start paying the bills, and you got to start thinking about, saving money for a house or investing and stuff like that. And then life settles in and you become a responsible adult. And I guess there's something that responsible adults and, 10 to 16-year-olds have in common, that they like playing board games. One has seemingly unlimited time, the other has limited time, but at the very least, they enjoy strategy. They enjoy the cards, they enjoy the board games, they enjoy miniature games, and they enjoy their hobbies. And I think that a lot of people between the ages of 16 and 26 are less hobby driven. They're more, like I said, they're doing social things. They're, engaging in activities that bring larger groups of people together and doing stuff that they would consider fun, right? And fun in that age group seems to be an end in and of itself, as opposed to a byproduct of doing things, right? So it was around this time that influencers started to rise, and that also people had gotten into the right age group to go back to these hobbies. And I guess it was just the luck of the draw. It was that point was always going to be that point, because that's what age those people were going to be at, and that's when YouTube was going to be starting up, and that's when eventually Instagram would come along, and Facebook and all these other social networks. And maybe Facebook, because it was definitely 2004, 2005 when it was on Invite, and that's when people again started to connect. MySpace wasn't really a place for you to connect with your people you knew. It was to connect with people you didn't know, and to play games you kind of got to connect with people you do know, right? Nowadays, there's lots of ways to connect with people you don't know and play games, because the hobby has grown so much. But back then, it was just in its new infancy, because, it had already been a thing, but it had kind of almost been abandoned. And I'd like to hear from some game store owners that owned game stores during the late 90s, early to mid 2000s, and what sales were like back then, and whether or not, prior to the late 90s, were sales really good, and then things went down. This is what I suspect. And then it didn't recover again until about 2005-ish. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I'd really like to hear more from people who were in that time period and were just getting back into games, or people who were running stores especially, or people who were going to local game stores and playing games. And I think it was around this time period when that started to really boom. At least that's what I noticed. There were a lot more game stores starting from about 2005 to 2010. There was a boom of game stores around, and then of course it grew even more in the 2010s. But anyway, let me know what you think in the comments below. Let me know about your experience of 2005.